He was deemed not fit to enlist in the Army nor to continue his studies at a community college. And yet in our third story, the state of Arizona deemed Jared Lee Loughner fit enough to purchase an assault weapon, an ammunition for it that would not have been legal had not the assault weapons ban not expired during the Bush administration. An Arizonan can legally conceal and carry a weapon without a permit. A gun owner in Arizona can bring a gun to the state capitol, to many restaurants, to bars. The state also bans its cities from passing gun laws stricter than the state law. All of that helped Loughner purchase a Glock 19 semi-automatic pistol a little over a month ago after passing a background check. Federal investigators say Loughner was carrying 90 rounds of ammunition on Saturday, loading his weapon with 2 high-capacity magazines, clips that can hold up to 30 rounds of ammo each. Federal laws do prohibit selling weapons to the mentally ill, but there's no way to determine if someone who's applying for a gun is in fact mentally ill unless they tell you they are, or unless they have been flagged by the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Arizona happens to be behind in entering its records into that database. Loughner railed against what he called government mind control on MySpace and YouTube. Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center first reported on this news hour in the special edition Saturday night that Loughner's rambling showed the influence of conspiracist David Wynn Miller. It was also reported by Fox News that Mr. Loughner had ties to the right-wing pro-white racist organization American Renaissance. However, a Homeland Security official tells the Plum Line's Greg Sargent that the department has not established any link between Mr. Loughner and that group. Joining me now is Mark Potok, the Director of Intelligence Project at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thanks again for your time tonight, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Keith. I appreciate it.
A layman looking at the YouTube videos, looking at the list of favorite books that this man claimed to have, would, I think, rightly say, ideologically, this guy is all over the map. Is that correct? Is he all over the map?
Well, that's not my reading on it. I think it's certainly true that when you look at his material, it's unbelievably discombobulated and hard to get much of a feel for what he's trying to say. He's also practically illiterate. But, you know, what is strung through his material, I think, is a very strong attitude of sort of the individual versus the totalitarian or sort of tyrannical state, the government. That I think you see both in his reading list, everything from the Communist Manifesto to Mein Kampf to some Ayn Rand books, George Orwell, and so on, to some of the kind of shards of ideas that you find when you look through his materials. I mean, he keeps coming back to the idea of the government uses mind control, it manipulates people, it uses grammar. You know, whatever it is, the government always seems to be the enemy. You know, I don't think that he is any kind of seasoned political thinker, that's for sure. I think he looks quite ill, mentally ill, but it does seem like he's absorbed at least some of these ideas from these groups on the extreme right, as you mentioned earlier.
I don't know if you heard this, but Sheriff Dupnick made a similar point earlier in this newscast that the thread of the writings seems to be simply anti-government. Is that itself a stance that it's identified with any one ideology?
Well, I mean, certainly there have been anti-government movements on both right and left, but I think that we have seen really in this country over the course of the last 30 years or so is a kind of demonizing of the federal government in particular by certain portions of the right, really big hunks of the Republican Party. You know, some of this has been reasonably legitimate. It's just a criticism of large government and so on, but it's often verged over into really vitriolic and demonizing attacks on the actual individuals who make up the government. At the end of the day, these are human beings. So I would say, yeah, I see the same thing as the sheriff. I think there's a very strong thread of kind of right-wing anti-government feeling in what Loughner had to say. What I did not see, despite the reports of some kind of link to American Renaissance, was anything suggesting racism, anti-Semitism, or even concern about immigration. I just didn't see that, and frankly, I think that the alleged link to American Renaissance is very, very weak if it exists at all.
To the issue of the gun in his hands, the New York Times reported that the number of Americans who support stricter gun laws dropped from 78% in 1990 gradually, steadily to 44% in 2010. Did we get apathetic about this? Why did things like shootings at Virginia Tech or at Columbine or any of the other dozen horrifying incidents have this sort of perverse impact?
Well, I'm certainly no expert on that, but I mean, one thing that occurs to me is how much the fear of having guns taken away has animated the world I cover, the world of the extreme right, the radical right. Certainly that was a very much a primary fear of the militia movement of the 1990s. I mean, that's part of their core conspiracy theory. The government is coming after our weapons. Then it will impose martial law. Then it will toss those who resist into concentration camps, and then we'll all be forced into a one-world government. But, you know, almost the first step in each of these theories is they're coming for our guns. And, you know, I think that's been stoked very much by organizations like the National Rifle Association, which really has played a loathsome role. I mean, you may remember that at the kind of peak of the militia movement, the NRA put out missives describing ATF agents and other federal law enforcement officials as jackbooted thugs. Immediately before the election in which Obama became president, they also participated in a kind of publicity campaign headlined "Prepare for the Storm," whatever that meant. So, you know, there are people out there who are stoking these fears, which I think are obviously unfounded. I mean, it seems quite clear that Obama intends no real gun control legislation, and he's said as much.
And the NRA did that for money. Mark Potok, the director of the Intelligence Project at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Once again, our thanks for your time, sir.